Yeah, all right. Hey, everybody. How you doing today? Thanks for being here. The first live feed of the year. Just getting over my second bout of COVID, so that's a heck of a lot of fun. So, I don't know. Being careful. Just got it anyway. So, don't get it again. Just saying. A few things, a little house cleaning. First thing is I have a new minor triads course coming out. It's called Mastering Minor Triads. And if any of you guys have got the Mastering Major Triads, it's sort of a second part. One is not necessarily dependent on the other, but I would recommend the both. And for today only, it's 55% off as a pre-order because it doesn't get launched till Saturday morning. So you got the link there with BV being super cool and doing all that stuff for me. The link is over down below. And I already see some of you guys ordered it already, so I really appreciate that. And thanks for everybody being here. The roll call, of course, Matt Gibson, awesome, Michael Cope, John Gorby, hey, you made it, man. And Phil Jones, Phil Carter, got Tom, Donald, I'm keep on going through these names. Anybody, thanks so much for being here. And BV, of course, and Tim Ferriss. Everybody else. Michael Burrell, I might have already said those names. Okay. So let's talk about what I'm here to talk about today. Really quickly. If you don't have my free background tracks, just go over to the link down below. You've got the YouTube freebie sign up there. You get 14 super high quality, fancy pants background tracks. So if you don't already have those, they're over there for free because I love you guys. All right. So today I want to talk about guitar myths. And it's funny, I got a few friends who chimed in on some of this stuff. Like I asked friend Rob Bailey, who's a great guitar player, and Jason Laughlin, who you may know, and Matt Schofield. So there's a lot of things that guitar players do, and it's just kind of a random list of things I was thinking about. What can I talk about today? And I thought guitar myths would be good. So the first one's sort of like a bit of a bee in my bonnet. I already went through all this, like on myself, is playing finger exercises will make you a better player. So people are going to, that sometimes those are fighting words with people. Are like, well, I do that all the time, and I play my finger exercise, and I'm talking about this kind of thing. Those things that people say, like, oh man, you see these YouTube videos, this exercise changed my life, and all that. Okay, it's important that you do some finger exercises. But all that makes you good at in the real world is going, right? It doesn't really help you musically in any way. That would be a strictly technical exercise. And through all my years of guitar playing, I kind of poll my friends on this, and we all feel the same way about this one. Beyond maybe a simple warm-up while you're watching TV, which I'll talk about that in a minute, I don't think it's really that effective. I think what it does is it gets you good at doing that one thing. Something that would be a much better usage of your time would be practicing something like major scales, things that you would actually use. Okay? So if I'm going to sit down and practice, I'll go through my major scale fingerings and then maybe patterns. Because I'm going to be using those much more frequently than I would be using, because that makes you just good at doing that. So, people will argue me on this one. By the way, is my vocals distorting? Get a little red line. Just let me know if they're distorting at all. Okay, so, and I say this through lots of experience because I practiced the heck out of that thing forever. And then I realized, this isn't really doing anything for me. This is just making me good at going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, if you just want to work strictly on, I'm not saying it's terrible, but it doesn't help your music. It doesn't help you become a better player. And this is a lot of what I want to talk about today. Things that make you become a better actual guitar player, as opposed to maybe just running these scales. Not even scales, these finger exercises. Okay. Number 2. Now, we can all get really guilty of this one, is a piece of gear will make you a better player. That is not true at all. Okay, well, partly true. If you get a really, really nice guitar, let's talk about realistically, guys. If you have a decent guitar, that's what you need. You need a decent guitar. If you've got a really terrible guitar, a lot of fighting with that can come into play and affect the way you play. But I'm talking about if you have a decent guitar, whether it's an inexpensive Fender or a Squier, which is a totally decent guitar, to a vintage guitar or anything in between, they can make a difference in one extent because you might like the sound, it can be a little inspiring, but they don't make you better. They were not going to make you a more musical player. They're not going to make you suddenly this, that was it. That was the key ingredient that I missed, And I can say this really true. Now, you guys know I've got some great guitars. Like my old Strat. It's a 1964 Strat. Did it make me a better player? Well, it made me more aware of certain things, like how nice a great instrument can feel and sound and how inspiring it can be. But when I pick up my Michael Tuttle Stratocaster, which is in a great guitar, I don't think about my old Strat. It's almost the A-B trap, if you know what I mean. Like, this Strat sounds better than this Strat, but only when I A-B them. But when I'm on the road with my Michael Tuttle Strat, I'm not really necessarily missing my old Strat. So does it make me a better player to have the old one than the newer one? Not really. There's things about it I like it, but I think, as I said in one of my videos about gas, we really, really go, man, if I just had that piece of gear, I would just play so much better. And it's not true. It's just not true. All right. So that would be my second thing that I think is really an important thing to think about when you, as we talk about some of these guitar myths. And if you guys have your comments, so certainly I'll get to them. And if you have any of your own guitar myths that you think we should throw in there, I'd love to hear them. Here's one that is another thing. Man, that guy can play everything. Like, that guy can play every style. I will say to you that one person cannot play every style at the top level. Okay, so you have certain guitar players and people I know I'm friends with and that who can play, have learned many different genres. And I can do that. I can fake country for a little bit, enough that I can maybe get away with it for a bit. And I can play blues and I can play rock and I can play some metal, because I have all these varied tastes in music. But do I play country, or do any of these people who can cover all these styles really well play country as well as, say, Albert Lee or Brent Mason? No. And they would be the first to admit that. I can do a little shredding, but can I shred like Yngwie Malmsteen? Absolutely not. Or Steve Vai or something. No. So I play Delta Blues. I have an Old National. Can I play it as well as my friend David Hamburger, for instance, or a specialist in that? No, not at all. So I can play it enough where as a hobbyist level and have fun. If I want to play a gig, I can do it. But, did Eddie Van Halen, does anybody play rock guitar as well as Eddie Van Halen and all these other things? And I would say no, there's nobody who does it. And people will say, well, what about this guy? He can cover all that stuff. I'm like, no. And I think a lot of the guys who I'm not naming, because I don't want people like, well, he get into this thing. I know a lot of those guys that people say they can cut everything. And they would say no. They would say, yeah, I mess around with it or kind of incorporated my style. But if you really want a great country guitar playing, Albert Lee, I say Brent Mason, the country guys. You want to hear great bebop guitar playing, it's going to be Pat Martino or certainly Wes Montgomery. So do a rock guy play jazz as well as Pat Martino? No. So that's one of those myths that I think was really kind of a cool feeling once I let that go, where I just said, I'm just going to do what I do, and I'm going to have fun with these other styles because I really enjoy playing other styles, and it informs my other playing. But, I work on jazz, but I have no delusions in my mind that I'm going to be a great bebop player, because if the world's best bebop players only play bebop. Like, that's their thing. The world's best metal players primarily only play metal. So, because the bar is so high. So that's a big myth. And I think that really people get really kind of, you can fool people for a bit of time and have fun with it. Like, first of all, it's guitar, so who really cares? You know what I mean? If someone plays country a little bit and isn't a great country guitar player, that's fine, whatever, it's fun. But the best country players are the guys who play country. The best blues guys are the guys who play blues. The best rock guys are the guys who play rock. So you do have to specialize if you want to be the best at all of it. There are some studio cats, like someone like Carl Verheyen, who is just ridiculous. He can play all these styles, but I'm sure if you asked him, like, he doesn't play. He's a great guitar player. I'm not. We should all be as good as Carl Verheyen. But his country guitar playing, it's cool, but it's not the level of these other guys. And I'm assuming that he would probably admit that too, because that's where he's gotten a lot of the information from as well. and people get very touchy about this stuff. It's pretty funny. Guitar players are very protective of their guitar playing. You know what I mean? You're talking, okay, Dave Davidson and Alex Skolnick. Now, Alex is a friend of mine. Alex is a spectacular metal guitar player and a really great jazz guitar player. But if you listen to what Alex is bebop playing, and if you hear this, Alex, please, with all due respect, he would say that he's not at the level of the best jazz, like a Pat Metheny. Who's at Pat Metheny's level? But I think you know what I'm saying. It's like Pat Metheny can't play metal like Alex Skolnick. And I think Alex is a great guitar player for sure, and he's a great dude. But it's just a general thing. So can you cover two styles kind of well? Yeah, but how about country and people? The idea that people can cover a bunch of things at a top level, I think, is a bit of a myth. There might be that one guy. I don't know. Who knows? Okay, which brings me to another thing, which is part of this whole thing. YouTube and Instagram videos that you see people play, the vast majority of the time, are not improvised. They are learned pieces that someone may have taken 1,000 takes at before they got that perfect 1-minute take, and you watch it, and then you feel terrible about yourself because you're like, listen to that. I've heard Matteo Sazzato talk about it, who is a ridiculous guitar player. He's one of the reasons I think if I'm remembering this right, he quit Instagram because the pressure of getting those videos together, practicing them, getting the perfect take, doing this over and over again. And he's a ridiculous guitar player. But it's the more amount of times. I saw a meme, I'm being all over the place. I saw a meme where someone, like this woman, steals her boyfriend's phone and is scrolling through the pictures and realizes like how many takes there are of this Instagram post on the guitar. So it's like 500 takes. And I do the same. You're going to do a YouTube clip. You get one thing, people are going to listen to it. I try to, my earliest takes are best. I'm more of an improviser. But when you see somebody play this ridiculously flawless thing that's perfect and 1 minute long and beautifully filmed and recorded, that was not the first take. So you really have to take that in and look at and go, okay, what I'm seeing may not be exactly what's happening. There are some people who fake it, and I can tell who they are. You just watch the track and you're like, you're not playing that live. You're just not. You're air guitaring that. So when I see that, I'm out. And there was that thing where people would speed some stuff up, and it just makes people feel bad about themselves, and because you really want to hear what somebody can do. Okay, so that's my other thing right there. That's all right, next up. Okay, and here's another thing. There's a great interview that my friend Rick Beato did over with Steve Lukather. You guys got to watch it. It's Steve Lukather. It's awesome. Really, really honest video, and he's one of the legends, and he's great about a kind of a different time in the music world that he was lucky enough and talented enough, of course, to have been involved in. And the people he grew up with, like his best friends, like Mike Landau and the Porcaro brothers, all these guys that he grew up with in the same high school, which is crazy. So he brought this up as well. So I know I'm feeling this as well. And this is one of Matt Schofield's input as well, is that YouTube and Instagram musicians are not necessarily able to play a gig. So when you watch somebody do this stuff on YouTube or on Instagram, these short background track, pre-rehearsed things, Lukather talks about this too. Like then you see the guy at NAMM on a stage and he's terrified or he's getting his butt kicked because they've never really played in a live situation. They've not carried a band. This is a generalization, but I found it to largely be true when you are in those situations. There's a lot of years of experience that comes from playing gigs and the daily thing that when you go on YouTube, you think everybody's got that bass covered, or Instagram. And it's really important to realize that there's a whole other skill set that when you go to see, let's try to think of a cool guitar or band or something like that. All right, let's talk about someone like John Mayer. You go see John Mayer play, he's the whole freaking package. He can sing, he plays the tunes, he plays guitar great, he's entertaining, he can carry a band. He's a professional musician entertainer. If you spend your whole life in your room, and sometimes we don't have any choices if you're not trying to do this professionally, but when you watch a guy on YouTube, you might see him live and be like, well, this isn't great, like that YouTube video or Instagram video. I don't want to sound like old guy, But it's true because, if I'm going to post a video and I'm going to take a guitar solo and I have a big clam in the middle of it, I'm not going to leave it. I'm going to do another take. But it's important to realize that there's a bigger picture that sometimes we don't see when we look at these smaller mediums like social media, and they can really distort the reality of the bigger picture. So that's a myth for me. That's something I think is really kind of cool to think about. Always think about what you're watching. Like, question everything, like, news stories or everything. Just question everything and think about it yourself. Like, oh, how many takes was that? It doesn't necessarily diminish the talent or the expertise, but it does make it a little more palatable where you're like, oh man, somebody just sat down and that was their first take, which is always sort of your imagination that it would be. Okay. The other one that makes me crazy, I'm going to insert, Jimi Hendrix didn't know how to read music and he didn't know what he was doing. Insert Jimi Hendrix, Alan Halsworth, someone crazy, amazingly great like that. Yeah, he didn't know what he was doing. That is the biggest load of crap ever. Jimi Hendrix knew exactly what he was doing. And if he didn't know how to read notes on a piece of paper, actual notation, reading how to, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He knew music. He certainly knew his triads. He knew how to outline chords. He knew his scales. He knew how to play blues. He knew how to outline those chord changes. He knew different styles. He was really, really good. So what does he doesn't know what he means? So people use that as an excuse, like, well, he didn't know what he was doing, so I don't need to know what I'm doing. And he knew exactly what he was doing. Anybody who's great knows exactly what they're doing. Now, does he have a perfect name for it in a music school sort of background way? I don't know. Some people do or some people don't, but that doesn't also matter because they know it in their own head about how to outline these chords, or, they know what they're doing because when you listen to them play, there's no other way they can play that way. Whether they sounded it out, they figured out their own way of doing it. Also, sorry, I got distracted by some posts there. I'm looking forward to getting to these because I know, hopefully stirring the pot a bit. Also, when you're around musicians your whole freaking life playing, you're going to pick up stuff from other people. It's just, if you don't, then you're doing it wrong. So for Jimmy or someone to play, let's talk about, Eric Clapton, who at the beginning said he didn't really know what he was doing. And you can here's a perfect example. There's a version of Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out from Layla. And Clapton solos over, and he basically plays pentatonic over the whole thing. That song's got a lot of chord changes, and he doesn't really make the chord changes. When he plays Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out now, he makes all the chord changes. So he's learned, he's figured things out, he's learned, he's gotten better by the surrounding people around him, and he's probably asked a lot of questions, he's got great ears, and he's Eric Clapton and all those things. So he knows what he's doing, and maybe he knows it in his own way. So that idea of they had no idea what they're doing, like they just picked up the guitar and just started poking around like, with somebody, I don't know, trying to think of an example. Just poking around, trying to find what happens, typing randomly and forming sentences. Total nonsense, total BS. He learned from other people, listened to records, studied those guys. So that one makes me crazy. Especially as an educator and player, it makes me absolutely nuts. All right. Hopefully this is fun, guys. My rantings. Another myth, guitar hacks exist. No, they don't. There's no such thing as a guitar hack. There might be something to help you learn something quicker, like caged. Some people are really into this cage thing. It only works for a certain thing. And if you don't do the work, don't put in the time, it's not going to get you any better. So there's no hack to get better. The hack that you need to get better is to practice with intent, with direction, and take your time with it, remember Robin talking about this in a bunch of workshops we did together, and he was like, yeah, man, it's okay if you don't want to do the work. It's cool. And what kind of great way to put it? He's like, yeah, man, it takes a lot of work. Some people just don't want to do the work. And that's true with anything, right? So anybody who's a really great painter put in a lot of work. Anybody who's a great singer, no matter if they're naturally gifted, they still work on their instrument. So there's no hacks, which brings me to the next thing. Great musicians are born that way. That's also not true. Now, Do certain people have a propensity for it? Yes, of course. And there are prodigies. And there's someone, like if you use the cliche of Mozart, who is obviously a genius and a prodigy. Sure. But he still had to practice. It might have come really quickly to him. But they are the vast, vast minority of people. So if we talk about someone who I completely idolize, I'm completely heartbroken. I can't even talk about it. Jeff Beck dying. See? He's amazing, but he still worked at it. He didn't just pick up the guitar and play that way. Of course, he had a talent for the instrument, but he could not, without practice, he wouldn't have gotten any better. So there's no hacks. There's no shortcuts. There's nothing. Somebody has a video saying, here's a shortcut for you to memorize different. No, there's no shortcuts. You still have to practice. All right. Do I sound like an old man yelling at the sky? Okay. This is from Jason Laughlin. I like this one a lot too. Great guitar players are just feeling it. They're not thinking about anything. They're just playing. Well, that's not true. They're thinking about creating a moment or thinking about where they want to go next. Now, is somebody soloing going, I'm going to play a diminished seventh arpeggio and land on the flat 3 and I'm going to... No, nobody's thinking it. Things go by too quickly, and that comes from the practice prior to that. But people are thinking about what they're doing. Are they in the moment? Of course, it's the culmination of the work that they've done at home and practiced. But when I'm soloing, I'm thinking. It's not just like so I get taken away by some mystical thing. Maybe that happens every once in a while, but a lot of times it's a matter of keeping your concentration together and trying to flow with it. Because the second you start thinking to yourself, yeah, man, I'm sounding pretty good, then you're done. That's always one, man, I'm sounding pretty good tonight. Clam or, kids these days, get off my lawn. Exactly. Exactly how I sound like I'm feeling. But these are all true. Any musician will talk to you about this. Anybody. I saw this cool little clip that on his Instagram channel, I forget what it's called. It's people talking about advice about playing music and jazz. One guy said, just remember, as much as you want to practice, if you think you're practicing a lot, there's always that kid somewhere else who's practicing 5 times as much as you. And so that's your decision, how deep you want to get, but there's always going to be that guy. There's always that guy. So I thought that was a cool little side thing here. All right, let me see what else I've got here. Here's an interesting one, and it is a myth too. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. Like, man, and Lucas who talks about this with Larry Carlton, but I always heard this phrase or this story as related to Chet Atkins, but it's pretty true. Hey man, that guitar sounds great after a gig. And you're like, how does it sound now? So the gear or the amp can make a certain degree of difference once you're at a certain point. So Lukather talks about this too. Somebody was talking about it to Larry Carlton, like, oh man, that 335 sounds great. And he's like, you mean that one over there in the stand? How's it sound now? Same kind of idea. So when I pick up, it's funny, pick up Robin's guitar, play through Robin's amp. Sounds exactly like me. And Lukather said when he played Eddie's guitar through his rig, it sounded like him playing through Eddie's rig. So slight differences, but it was still him, because no matter where you go, there you are. So that's a big one. So people think that it's the amp or the gear that really makes the difference. It's not. And those things are always really shocking. So when Robin or my friends of mine, or Matt or David Grissom, or insert any guitar player who can play well, picks up my guitar, they sound exactly like them, no matter what. It's a crazy phenomenon. I think it was most shocking with David Grissom playing a gig. He was here one day and he played through my amp and he was playing through my guitar, not his guitar, like another guitar, and he sounded exactly like him. Sonically, I was like, wow, it sounds exactly like you. The attack is so different. And when Matt comes over and he plays and stuff, he just sounds like him. Doesn't even sound like him playing my guitar. It just sounds like him, no matter what. So it's a beautiful thing, and people overlook that all the time. And they think that that's back to that first thing, that the piece of gear will make you different. So if you're going to a gig and you hear a guitar player and you go, man, that amp sounds great, don't say that. Unless he's your good buddy and they know what you're talking about, just say, man, you sound great. What amp are you using? Or something like that. So that's really one of the other myths. Okay, So there's my chat for that real fast. I'm going to go through some questions and comments. I see some good ones coming in, like heavier strings are better. That's a good one. You got one. I should have gotten that one. But just real fast, once again, I have my minor triad pre-sale, Mastering Minor Triads course. It is launching on Saturday morning, and you get 55% off on the pre-sale for today. What a bargain. I take you through a no-nonsense, methodical way to learn how to learn your minor triad inversions on adjacent string sets and how you apply them. I did that with my Mastering Major Triads course. So it's a continuation of that. And the following course coming up is how you solo with them and how you use them in really practical situations. But this course is really designed as a reference guide. Like, I need something to practice. This is how you practice it. I take you through ways to practice it. You can practice it with me. I feel like a lot of people don't make those courses enough. And this is something Jason brought up, Jason Lachlan, that sometimes a course like that doesn't sell well. The last one did, fortunately, because I think people understand. Sometimes the hardest work is the least sexy work. Like if I did shredding blues licks, that's one thing, but memorizing your minor triad inversions and through all your string sets is actually going to be way better for your musicianship and your guitar playing at every angle than it would be shredding blues licks. Which brings me to the one point about the course, and just a general thought is, I was going to kind of throw this on this list, but it requires so much definition that even practicing scales and modes and things like that is not as important as knowing your chord tones. It's not as important as knowing your triads, seventh chords, and your arpeggios. Those are king. Scales are cool because they develop your hand strength and all that, and knowing what the right or wrong note is. But now when I'm soloing, I'm not really thinking about scales. I'm thinking about what notes are in what chord and how I can target those. And the way you get to that point is the hard work of memorizing your triads and their inversions. And you can do that by using the link below. All right, so you get the idea. That was one thing, too, that scales, I think, are kind of overrated. Some people might fight me on that, but having gone through all of this stuff, gone to music school in Berkeley where I went, is very modal scale oriented, and to kind of get out of there and after a while later and realize that, like, I think chord tones are much more important than the actual scale, because once you're comfortable with it, everything is kind of fluid except for the notes that you want to resolve to. Okay, so let me go through this. Just go through some of this stuff here. I'll try to ignore the bad jokes. So thanks once again, everybody who's here. I really, really appreciate it. Nice DGT. Yeah, you saw the video on this. This is just a shocker how much I like this guitar. Not a shocker. They're great. But this one, it's just a great guitar. Very happy with it. Okay. Now, your friend had COVID 5 times. 2 times. I don't know what my wife and kid have not gotten it. Just me. Anyway. Okay. Jason Carter, I did that spider thingy for 3 weeks, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, that kind of stuff, and realized the same thing. Yeah, that those finger exercises, kind of mindless ones, don't really help that much, I don't think. Panda asks how I would recommend memorizing your pentatonic scales and all those inversions. And Jason Carter answered, yes, over at TrueFire, I've got a course that goes right into this. It's called Pentatonic Deep Dive. And I would check that out. I think it would be helpful. Some people ordered into minor triad courses. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. There's things, this is Jason Carter, there's things I don't want to play or have no interest in playing. So why learn those things? Okay, yeah, let me just talk about that for a minute, because this is important. And I've heard a little Steve Vai quote recently that play to your strengths. Like, people say, oh, you should work on your weaknesses. I'm like, no, I don't believe that at all. I work on my strengths. And, look, if I can't play an arpeggio, that's a weakness, then I need to work on that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, I found at one point my strength is I have a strong love of melodicism. My favorite guitar players, Jeff Beck, just super melodic all the time, above all. So I realized that I kind of leaned towards that playing, and I started to really kind of double down on being more involved in the nuances of notes, and I think how to make them sound good and sound unique, like someone like a Jeff Beck or a B.B. King, as opposed to where I came from my original, which is being more shreddy. And I started realizing, like, well, I really don't put on shred records, and I get bored really fast practicing a lot of shred stuff. I wish I could do it, but as I think I've talked about before on the channel, if you really wanted to do it, Jeff, you would have practiced it, because you're smart enough to know that if you grew up wanting to sound like Alan Holdsworth, that would have been your prime directive to develop that kind of vocabulary. My prime directive in the records I always come back to is my most enjoyable records for guitar playing: Pink Floyd records, Jeff Beck records, Eric Clapton records. If we're talking about more modern guys, talk about Steve Lukather or Michael Landau or Robin Ford. There's always this really connection of melodicism. I like John Mayer's playing a lot. I'm not a huge fan, maybe because of the age thing. I'm older than him. You know how it is, Not that I dismiss in a negative sense. It's just, you kind of listen to the guys you like to listen to, and I hear his influences, and he's great. But, man, the guy's super melodic. He's such a strong guitar player. He's just so good. So when I put him on, I'm like, yeah, I enjoy his guitar playing. So I do like some guys you can rip, of course, but that's not my strength. My strength has been the guys who I really like, because that's what I enjoy listening to the most. So, of course, that's what I'm going to do the most. All right. All right. Sorry, my contacts are all weird again. Ugh. All right. If you could put a question before the thing, so I'm looking here, trying to read through these, a question mark. The Lukather interview was really great. I highly recommend it. It's Rick Beato's Lukather interview. It's really awesome. All right. This is Cody Jarrett. The only path to doing what you do, or when you feel like doing it, is art, a lot of trauma, depression, rejection. Usually try alternate tunings. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. It's tough being a guitar player. No, it's not tough being a guitar player. It's not, you know what I'm getting. It's not like, I love when people, for instance, I posted about this PRS, and I actually delete a few people because they were really, the hatred for PRS was so deep that they were belligerent on the page, and I just ejected them from guy, they even talked about him. It's not like world politics. It's just a freaking guitar, So when I say guitar playing is difficult or a tough profession, you understand what I mean. There's a lot worse things out there. But, let's talk about YouTube. I mean, man, people are freaking brutal sometimes when they comment. So you're like, well, I'm doing this stuff for free, and I hope to have fun with people, and someone will just take a personal swipe at me, and you're like, what is going on with you? So when I'm talking about guitar is hard, since we're artists, or you want to be an artist, and being a musician is a form of self-expression, you are opening yourself up, and you have to be a good artist, opening yourself up to the world around you. And as a result, if someone says you suck, whether they're true or not, it's very, very difficult to not internalize that. And I can have, 100 posts saying you're the best, but it's that one guy. And then the worst stuff is when some guy might be a jerk, but have just a grain of truth in it. And then you're like, then that's all you think about. It's very difficult to push that aside. So I don't know, it's a bit not of the myths thing, but just stuff about guitar playing. It's very, very difficult to put yourself out there and want to get better. And it can be trying emotionally, because you're trying to get better and you're not getting any better. And if you take it seriously, then you attach self-worth to it and all this stuff. And then suddenly you're off the deep end worrying about stuff. And then you hate yourself and all those things. And then, excuse me, that is also a byproduct of the internet, which is a beautiful thing that I can talk to you guys. And I got a bunch of people here listening to me yammer on, and I appreciate every one of you. But, there was a point in time where you never had to worry about any of this stuff. You just played and worked on and practiced. Okay. Um, oh, Keith's here. Keith 5 Watt World. What's up, Keith? Controversial question. Is there something like talent, or is there just work and more work? Okay, it's a good question. And yeah, there's talent. Yeah, I'm not going to dismiss that. But anybody who is talented still worked really hard. I mean, I've been around that ridiculous degree of talent where, from an early age, someone just took to it and got good so much quicker and has perfect pitch and understood music. And I keep on using Robin as an example, but being in a room with Robin Ford and just hanging out, and I'm just like, I know I'm a good guitar player, but holy crap. Like, there's just this other level of musicianship and something I just don't have. Now, is it through years of experience? Certainly. That's someone who's been gigging from very, very early age. But talking to, I know some of his friends from when he was a kid, and they're like, nah, he was always great. Like, to some extent, like, he just picked it up and he was just good from day one. So yes, there are those people who do that. But that being said, if you take someone like a Julian Lage, who was a prodigy at a very young age, he still practices his butt off, though. Practiceaholic, so much to the point where he came down with vocal dystonia and couldn't play for a while because he'd over practiced. So I think, to answer that question, I think talent is somewhat overrated. If in my case, I'm not trying to be humble brag or whatever the hell you want to call it. I don't think it took me a while to tap into my guitar playing, if that makes sense. I listened back to my recordings when I was younger, and I was just missing a lot of things. And some of it came with age, but a lot of it came with teaching a lot, analyzing. I'm pretty analytical now about how I approach the instrument, and that's been really helpful. And that's what I try to teach people, that you can get some shortcuts if you just focus in on certain things. Those are the shortcuts. These are the important things, like roadblocks. Don't go over that roadblock. Go around here, and you can, or speed bump. Don't go down that speed bump or over that speed bump. Just go straight to this, and that'll help. Yeah, I mean, I was always, the high school guitar hero, whatever, of 3 guitar players. Who cares? But then when I got to music school, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of just somewhere right in the middle. So it was nice to know you're not down there, but there was a lot of really great people when you go to school with Kurt Rosenwinkel or someone like that. So for me, it was a lot of work. It wasn't like this natural ability. I don't have perfect pitch. My ears are my weakest part, and I have to work on them. Like my brother, I love him dearly, of course. Perfect pitch, pretty much, but he doesn't ever really play guitar. Makes me mental. God bless him. Okay. Yes, but part of it is a gift. Yeah, but you have to tap into the gift, and the gift doesn't come for free, What I mean by the gift doesn't come for free, a lot of the people who are super, super prodigious in other parts of their lives very often are lacking. I think, I was at Berkeley, and it was Branford Marsalis. Someone said to him, do you aspire to being as good as Coltrane or practice as much as him? And he said, no, I want to have a social life. I mean, that guy, he didn't ever stop practicing. He's like, I want to enjoy life. I want to be as good as I can be, but I also just want to enjoy life. And to be as good as someone like Coltrane, I'm just not committed. You talked about the talent level, he goes, but I'm not committed to that level of practice every day, which is obsessive. That's so. Yeah, Hendrix put in a lot of time. They all did. Yeah, I ignored these hack videos. Yeah. I mean, some of them can be kind of cool, but you have to remember, and I'm guilty of it too, my friends, YouTube clickbait titles, and I have to use them sometimes. Let's talk about that. It's a whole algorithmic thing, my friends. I had put something like, don't do this could ruin your guitar playing. And I felt kind of weird about putting that title, and then it becomes my biggest video, and it brings in new people. Those videos really get people to click on it, unfortunately. And then when the algorithm picks up on it in YouTube, more and more people watch. So that helps me make my living. So these are these unfortunate things that we have to do sometimes. Thumbnails and the titles are huge. Also, notice I'm being friends with a lot of big YouTubers who've been super generous and helpful with me. Keith and Rick Beato and Tim Pierce and Brett Papa and all this. Sometimes they'll have 2 or 3 titles for a video. And if the video doesn't do well in the first hour, you switch out the title and see how that one does. Because that's what makes people, there's so much information. People want to go like, oh, what's that about? So the thumbnail and the title are massively huge. Clapton should have bought Jeff's chord tone solo. Yes, right. I like that. Masses are normally asses. You play them in style and enjoy life. Yeah, of course. Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. But it is hard to not compare yourself to other people when you're watching YouTube or Instagram and all these things like that. All right. What else got here? I stick with comparison is the thief of joy. Yeah, it's true. And thank you for that. That was Jason Carter. Keith sent me these cool books. I've got it over there, like Steal Like an Artist. So everybody steals from everybody else, and the idea of you start stealing enough and these things become your own. So it's important that you find your own voice in doing that. But thanks again to Keith for those books. Show your work. Get off my King Lear. Get off my lawn. Kids these days, right? Let's see what else I got here. Old guys rule. I know. Suddenly, I used to be the youngest guy in bands. Now I'm not. When did that happen? All right. Let's see what we got here. I'm sorry, guys. I got really far behind. A lot of people. Suffering equals playing great blues. That's largely true. I think you do live what you live comes out for sure. Absolutely. Well, love your channel. Love the Guitar Myth. Thank you. That's from James Booker. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Internet has no accountability, sadly, and that is totally true. It's totally true. What about wood types on electric guitars, or does it really matter? Oh, okay, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that kind of crazy stuff. The guitar is the guitar. Some people say like, oh, I don't like maple necks, and I kind of thought I didn't like maple necks, and then one of my favorite guitars now is a maple neck. So the guitar is the guitar. And I was talking about if you watch the PRS video, I have this beautiful guitar I bought, and then I have this one that PRS was so kind to let me check out and work with me. That's a great guitar. That 594 is great. There's just something about this one that I like better. And I choose all of my guitars. I have the guitars that I go, any of my Les Pauls or the 335. I've chosen out of thousands. Or you Monty Python fans, and so even on my old Strat, you chose it, and any guitar is like that. And so I didn't care that this was whatever wood it was. It's this roasted maple neck. Generally, I don't really like roasted maple necks on Strat type guitars. I think they sound a bit pingy, generally. But on this guitar, it doesn't. I don't know. So it comes to guitar specific things. So I can't ever say I like alder more than I like basswood or does a Brazilian fingerboard sound better than an Indian rosewood board? I don't know. I mean, it all comes down to the guitar. There's no guarantee that that's going to make any difference. Things that I know I generally like medium to lighter weight guitars. That's just a physical thing, a very heavy guitar. I mean, I played some Les Paul Customs that sound amazing, but they're 10 pounds, and I'm not going to walk around with a 10-pound Les Paul. Like, it's craziness. Or stand on a gig all night. Even when I was younger, it's like old guy, but one of the things about living in New York, a lot of times you have to have your guitar on your back. So I'm not walking around New York City with a 10-pound Les Paul and a gig bag on my back with a pedal board and an amp. No. So I look for things that are a little lighter. If it's too light, I sometimes don't think they sound that great. Those are all just general things. Does nitro sound better than thin polyurethane? If the guitar sounds good, the guitar sounds good. Excuse me. If it's loaded up with a quarter inch of thick polyurethane, yeah, that's. I don't think that's going to sound all that great. There are always exceptions, but you think about it. If You strum a guitar, acoustic guitar, and then you put your hand on it. Other things, do pickups count more so than the wood of the guitar? Or since this is that age-old thing that people say, like, oh, but this guy on YouTube did a video where he put a pickup and then he put it between this two pieces of wood, and then he put it on a guitar and it sounded no different. So the pickup, nobody I know who's a serious guitar guy or luthier agrees with that. The guitar, and I think David Grissom put it best on Keith's thing when he's talking about his new guitar. A good guitar the good pickups will accentuate what the guitar sounds like. So I look for resonant guitars. I think I choose those because, in my mind, the ones that sound best acoustically almost always sound the best amplified. So that's a myth to me that, a few myths, that I like a specific tone wood collection. I don't. I just like the guitar on its own because they come together. Sometimes the planets align and sometimes they don't. And you just look for the ones where the planets align. So, cool video coming up this week. I got to film it. 2 1964 Stratocasters. This is mine, and this is my brother's. So, only a few months apart, and I'm gonna do a video on how different they sound and how similar they sound. They sound different, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. I've got 264 Strats in my hand right now, but they sound different. And there's all sorts of reasons why that, but I think it'll be a fun video. See what you guys think when that's done. So there's a perfect example of two guitars pretty close to each other. I mean, obviously these are pickups that are a little different. There's differences, but two 1964 Strats sound very different. Okay, let's get to more questions here. Now, a lot of spiral thinking can start to go on with this stuff. Any chance you could speak about the process of going from being a good player into being an artist developing your own style? I can try. You kind of, in a weird way, you got to fake it, I think. This is just thoughts that are coming to my head. You got to believe your own BS in a way. So what I mean by that is when I play that intro tune, like Highlands, when I play that live, I really took a... Now, let me put this. Coming from a Scottish family, anybody know the Scots are pretty no-nonsense people. And my uncle is a sheep farmer, and I just remember working on his farm, and you just get up, you get into the sheep pen and you shovel the sheep crap. That's what you do. There's no nonsense, no complaining, no BS. So it was a tough time for me to look at myself as an artist. It took a little while for me to come to these ways that I can comfortably talking about seeing myself as an artist. It's like when you hear, my friend produces movies, and I was talking to her about when you see artists interviewed, or you see actors interviewed, and sometimes you just want to scream because they're like the most self-involved. Like, oh, it was such a gift working with this director, and the art, this and that, and you're like, wow, you just live in your own world that money can afford, and it can be very disappointing. And then I love when you see an actor who's just like, yeah, it was great, I couldn't believe it, So I kind of lean more towards that, but I do try to tap into this thing of that what I do is artistic, and I am trying to create something. So on a gig, I sometimes have to remove myself from being a guitar player into being a musician who's trying to express something to an audience. And sometimes it's that, what I mean by faking it is I just have to go like, how would I imagine Jeff Beck felt when he was performing? I don't know. I've never had the pleasure of talking to him, but I had the pleasure of talking to Robin, and Robin's like, no, man, you're just you're in that moment. You have to stay in that moment. You have to walk into that. You're going to create a situation with the other musicians, and you're going to take your audience with you. That's what we're here for. That's your job. And you have to give into it, and you have to be open to where it goes and where it takes you. So for me, it was very much a mindset of walking into the gig and thinking, okay, I'm going to make an artistic statement here without trying to sound like a jerk. You know, sometimes when people talk about art, it makes me want to throw up, because you're like, oh, get over yourself, man. Like, that's that Scottish upbringing in me of being very pragmatic and practical about things. But, you know, I am touched by beautiful art. You know, when you hear Jeff Beck play Over the Rainbow, it's transcendent. When you hear, man, I could just go on. I'm talking about guitar players. You hear Yo-Yo Ma play, you hear Itzhak Perl, all these great names. There's a reason why they're the big names, because there's something transcendent about them. And they've done all the work, but they are thinking about the interpretation and how to be musical. And for me, it was a mindset. Other thing really too, guys, you got to play with good bands. And if your band's well rehearsed, so if you're interested in hearing what it sound like live, there's those gigs, few tracks for the gigs that I did with a nice band on the road for a bit over in the Czech Republic. And I was happy with the playing in that, because you learned to settle in with the band, and then you felt free because you trusted the other people. So trust in the band is a big deal too. But a lot of it is me getting out of my own head and just trying to be like, okay, I'm trying to create a moment here. And I liked Robin's view of it. Like, you're trying to create a moment, and you're there to entertain people, and almost the audience is secondary in a certain sense. Like, you're there to play what makes you happy, and they're there because they like what you do, and that's your job. So if I start taking that approach, I find it really helps me out quite a bit. All right. Hopefully that answered that. All right. So we got here. Yeah, another myth, Michael Cope, right? One's musicianship is inversely proportional to the knowledge of theory. That's totally true. But the biggest one that drives me crazy, and I've talked about this, is that, I don't need to know music theory. That's going to hamper my creativity. And it's just like the biggest cop-out in the world. It makes me freaking crazy. And some players I really like talk about this. They're great players. Yeah, I don't want to know all that stuff because it was going to hamper my creativity. I'm like, so knowing how to read hampers your speech, or, you know what I mean? Like, just apply that to anything else. And there you go. Like, if you're an electrician, I don't want to learn about electricity or ohmages or I don't need to know any of this stuff because it'll hamper my creativity. What? I don't need, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever when you logically go through that argument. The more you know, the better you're going to be. And it's all how you put it together. That's all. All right. Hold on. All right, so we got here. Okay. I've been playing a long time lately. This is from Daniel Johnson, and you're going through my True Fire courses. Thank you very much. I still have a hard time keeping track of where I am in a blues solo. Any tips? Like play along with or listen to a blues track and follow along the measures without actually playing. Work on the call and response method of playing, where you're going to where you have to consciously fill in a groove on the second half of each of the 4-bar phrases. I know it's a lot of info right there, but very often when you're learning the True Fire solo that I've given you, or in my over Jam Guitar Lessons, just do it away from the guitar and then logically say, oh, he's on bar 1, bar 2, bar 3. And when you're listening to a blues tune, consciously know what bar you're on. If you don't innately and internally know what bar you're on, you're always going to have a problem keeping up with it. All right. All right. Did you talk about heavier strings? I'll talk about that for a second. Let's go back to that again. Yeah, heavier strings can sound really great. They can. My son's old Captain America. Heavier strings can sound great. Light gauge strings sound great. And Rick Beato did that really kind of well-viewed video on lighter strings and with more distortion. More gain, for sure. If I'm playing a heavy track, I've got my Jakey Lee Charvel, I've got 9s on it because it sounds better. for heavy stuff than 10s do. Less low end, a little more tight. I use 10s because I just like them. I don't play super gainy, and I just like the way they feel. A lighter string would require that I change my touch, and I don't want to do that right now. Heavier string, I'm not a big guy, and I already have some hand problems, so switching over to 11s is just stupid for me. I think we talked about this, that Josh Smith was over the house, and he's using 13s, but if you ever seen Josh in person, he's a big dude. He's a big dude. So I can't play those strings. I'm frail and weak. So do they sound better? Yeah, they can sound better, but for what? But will they make you play better? No, actually, they're harder to play. So whatever works for you. Billy Gibbons used 7s or 8s, whatever he always says that. Yeah, of course, yes. So did B.B. King. All right. If the goal is to be an artist and you have a couple of decades accomplishing, my advice is not to listen to anyone. Well, that's a tough one, right? Not listening to anyone. That's always been a tough one. It brings me back to the internet, because sometimes you're like, man, people are freaking brutal. For the most part, it was really supportive, and I appreciate that. But sometimes people are just, wow. And that's also the other thing is, when you watch somebody play, you need to understand that sometimes what you're seeing is not reality. It could be punched in. It could be a composed solo. I've heard Phil X talk about this, and Rick Beato and I have talked about this, that there's not a lot of improvising going on. Like, I grew up being an improviser, so for me to write a solo is very unusual for me. I usually just improvise the stuff and see what happens. And things grow from that. I can't imagine playing the same solo on every tune. That's not to knock somebody who creates solos, like, Eddie Van Halen wrote solos, not of course his own, but he composed those as David Gilmour does. And so, thanks for the top chat there. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. You're the man. All right. Jim Solomon. Myth, playing blues is easy. I mean, how hard can it be? It's only 3 chords, right? Yeah, man. The truth is, to really master any style of music, challenging requires putting in the time. Absolutely. That's why when you listen to Sirius, I got Sirius, for... I've been listening to Howard Stern since high school. And Sirius Blues, I can't stand it. There's so much bad blues guitar, I can't even tolerate it. Like, it's just terrible. Because there's good blues and there's bad blues. It's because, 3 chords in a pentatonic scale does not make you a great blues player. There's so many of them. Ugh. Okay, it's good. This is a Fishbulb. Creativity is formed by the grand sum of your tastes, what you listen to, and your experiences. Is why the 1, 2, 3, 4 exercise is not ideal. Sure. But at the same time, like practicing a line, creating an idea, and then practicing that is a really important thing. That helps quite a bit too. Right, modes are just major scale started on a different note on is my nails on the chalkboard phrase. Yeah, the mode thing, people get really kind of crazed over that whole thing. That's a rabbit hole. That's a rabbit hole for sure. I prefer my electrician or plumber not to get creative, to be honest. I may be a poor thing, but you know what I'm saying? But they do know their craft is my point. Pretty funny. Fact or myth, your pick is just as important for tone as your strings or pickups. Yeah, the pick is really important. Once you get kind of into it, I went through a ton of picks, and if you can see this mess in front of my table right here, there's a lot of picks here, but I always end up going with the Diodario Black Ice. I think they sound really good. They sound as close to my fingers as possible. So yeah, picks are a big deal, All right. Let's see what we got going on here. Loving the benefits of your chats. Thanks so much. I heard Paul Gilbert say he struggled to play, still recovering here, blues in his 40s because it wasn't something he ever tried to focus on. There's good shirts and bad shirts. All right, well, we can ask John Varvatos what he thinks about that. I'll always side with John Varvatos, if you know who that is. All right, so and with Paul Gilbert, I actually heard Paul Gilbert say he struggled to play blues in his 40s because it wasn't something he ever tried to focus on. Yeah, if you don't play it, it's not something you work on. It's not going to come out in your playing. And then it takes a while for it to really come out, right? Like really, really come out. And then at some point, you just might not even be that good at it, right? Or what is a good blues player? That's those other things. Do they float your boat? So that's where it kind of falls into my thing of like, can't master all of this stuff. You can be pretty good at a lot of it, that's for sure. And blues rock. Don't underestimate the importance of your tone shirt. Any method books that shaped your understanding of the fretboard progressions in jazz, blues in general? Method books. I remember looking at Mick Goodrick's Advancing Guitarist book. That was pretty cool for just kind of opening up the fingerboard in a lot of ways. But no, not really. It was just, I always had the benefit of having some really good, strong teachers. That was important to me, and they helped focus my attention in the right way. The biggest thing that really helped me was I used to teach at the National Guitar Summer Workshop when that was around. And you just were hanging around all summer with a bunch of great guitar players. Then I went to music school, before that, and you were hanging around with a bunch of great guitar players. So what I tried to always do is surround myself with musicians who were better than me. And that was always the most important thing. Even if it's a friend, like growing up, my great friend, Chris Amelar, he was just a great guitar player, and he was always better than me. So I just would have this sort of foil of great friends, and I would just watch him play, and he would push me forward. So that to me, more so than any kind of method book or anything, was absolutely just being around other musicians who are trying to do what you're doing. Certainly ones that are better than you is the big deal, the real big deal. But not so much better than you that you just feel like, oh man, this is just terrible. Why am I here? I'm talking about people who are just enough better than you. You feel like you're not completely overwhelmed. That they want to play with you. And I was fortunate enough to be in that situation many, many times in my life that people were like, oh, they thought I was a good enough guitar player to bring me in, even though I wasn't at their level. They saw something in what I was doing, so that was great. Okay, Bill Shoketis. Jeff, be honest. Do pro guitarists look and laugh when you see players with a giant pedal board? I recently had it at Bruno, and you were telling me about that. No, like there's some. Look, if you look at Joey Landreth, his pedal board, this is a monstrous thing because he's trying to recreate sounds that was on his record. So. It depends on the gig. And I have a large pedal board and I have a small pedal board, but it depends on the gig, and who cares if you're having fun with it and it doesn't become a distraction to your playing and you're not futzing with your pedals on the gig, ruining a performance. No, I don't care. Trying to think of other guys, like thinking about Doyle Bramwell popped into mind. He's got a big pedal board. Doesn't sound like he does though, right? You're not hearing him. So it all depends. You've got someone like Adrian Ballou, which that's part of his thing, So I don't laugh. I just want to hear what somebody plays like. I got a top chat. Thank you so much, Jim, for the top chat. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Chord Chemistry by Ted Green. Yeah, that's one of the one of those books that you got to be way into it. And also, let's talk about that for a minute. I was having this conversation with my buddy Corey Congilio about jazz methods and learning these things. And a lot of these things come down to what style of music you want to play, right? Lucas who talked about this. Pat Metheny had said to somebody he knew, talking about being a guitar player. He's like, well, if you want to be a jazz musician, that's a full-time job. But why don't you do you? You're really great at playing this, so why don't you focus in on that? And that's where the kind of thing that I came to as well, that I love jazz, but I'm not going to be a jazz guitar player. So the chord chemistry by Ted Green is awesome, but those voicings sometimes don't really apply to the kind of music that I end up playing a lot, or I pick up enough for it. And, and sometimes those books, like I wish I had it in front of me. The Slonimsky's Thesauruses of Scales, and it's just this crazy book of every interpolation or intrapolation, these terms that he used of every way you can play a scale or chromatic lines. It's just the most exhaustive thing in the planet. And you look at it, and like my head just kind of goes, whoop, like it just starts to spin a little bit. And for some people, those books are really, really good. I know Frank Zappa talked about how important that book was for him. But if you're like at heart a bluesy rock guy like me, not so much. So, all right. Any more questions before we jump off? I've been on for an hour, and wow, a lot of people are still here. I really appreciate it quite a bit. Once again, if you want to help me out in the channel, you can check out my jam guitar lessons. I have 55% off, because it's a pre-order just for today on my Mastering Minor Triads course. And you can use the link that BV has been so helpful putting on the side there. We have the Mastering Major Triads as well, and that's in the link below. And if you want to check out some free background tracks, just go over to Jam Guitar Lessons YouTube freebies. You can get the 14 blues backing tracks for free. And thanks, Tracy Farmer. Woo! Whoa, geez, thanks, Tracy. Tracy Farmer. Okay. All right, my good friend Tracy is the man. This was Tracy's guitar. This guitar has gone through the some of my friends' hands. This is a Mike Landau master build, which I love this guitar. And this was Tracy's, and then it was my friend Eli over at Two Rocks, and then it went over to Watchtower Guitars, which is a great store. And then I traded my Klon for it. So this is Tracy loved this guitar, and I think he wants it back, but he's not going to. Thanks, Tracy. Appreciate it, buddy. So it's pretty funny how that one made the rounds. All right, any other questions, anyone? The Major Triad class is awesome. I can already hear the difference between that and my playing. Thanks for putting it together, the work over there. Thanks so much, James. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I'm trying to make that, a bunch of courses like that are coming up. A little bit more actually learning the guitar the right way. All right, I don't want to keep BV up. I don't know what time it is where you are. I appreciate everybody being here. Please hit the like and subscribe button and all that stuff. And go over to Jam Guitar Lessons. You can pick up my Mastering Minor Triads. It helps me out directly. If you like the channel, that's a great way to help me out as well, to pick up the courses. And thanks so much to BV for being here, and everybody else. Super appreciative of everybody here. And I will be back soon. And pretty soon we'll see the video on comparing the two old Strats. That'll be a ton of fun. All right, until then, everybody, thanks so much for being here, and I will see you later. Thanks.